6 years ago, I had a daughter who called me Dad in the only language she knew. She couldn't speak with her mouth. She never had. But she could say more with 4 taps on a screen than most people say in an entire conversation. I know, because I spent 3 years learning how to listen. Her name is Lily. She was born with cerebral palsy, and when she was 18 months old, a specialist told my wife and me that our daughter would likely never produce verbal speech. I remember the drive home from that appointment. Nobody said anything. My wife cried quietly against the window. I kept my eyes on the road and my hands on the wheel, and I told myself that whatever she needed, I would figure out. What she needed was a voice. Not the one she was born without, but one we could build for her. I was 54 years old when I first learned what an AAC device was. Augmentative and alternative communication. It is a tablet, essentially, but programmed with symbols, phrases, whole sentences that a nonverbal person can select to communicate. You touch the screen and a voice speaks for you. For Lily, it was a revelation. For me, learning to navigate that device alongside her, learning which symbols she had memorized, and which ones frustrated her, and which combinations made her laugh, that became the most important work I had ever done in my life. By the time she was 5, I knew her device better than I knew anything. I had spent nights with a programmer's manual and YouTube tutorials, adding custom vocabulary, building communication trees, making sure that if my daughter ever wanted to tell me something complex, she would have the words available to her. She was brilliant. Anybody who spent 10 minutes watching her use that device could see it. She navigated menus faster than I did. She developed her own shorthand. She found ways to say things the default programming never intended her to say, combining symbols in sequences that were technically not words but were entirely her own sentences. I told my wife once, watching Lily at the breakfast table spelling out a joke she had invented, that our daughter might be the smartest person in the room. My wife looked at me without smiling and said, "She gets it from my side." I should have paid more attention to the way she said it. The divorce was not sudden, but it felt sudden. When you are inside a marriage that is quietly failing, you notice the individual moments only in retrospect. The coldness over dinner. The way she stopped mentioning my name when she talked to her mother on the phone. The way she started making decisions, large ones, financial ones, without telling me. By the time she handed me the papers, it had been dying for probably 2 years. I had been too focused on Lily's therapy schedule, her device updates, her school accommodations, to notice that the woman I had married was already somewhere else in her mind. She got primary custody. Her attorney was better than mine. Her family had money and mine did not. The judge gave me visitation supervised initially because my wife had filed an affidavit claiming I had a drinking problem that I had never had. I did not drink. I had never been a drinker. But the affidavit existed on paper, and paper has a way of winning arguments. The supervised visits lasted 4 months. Then, my ex-wife was granted permission to relocate with Lily to her mother's house in another state. The reason given was that her mother, Lily's grandmother, had medical expertise, she was a retired nurse, and could assist with Lily's daily care. The judge found this reasonable. I found it devastating. Before she left, I had one final supervised visit at a neutral facility. A woman from the Family Services office sat in the corner of the room taking notes, while Lily and I sat across from each other at a small table. Lily tapped my hand 3 times. That was ours. It had always meant, "I see you, I hear you, I am here." I tapped her hand back 3 times. On her way out, my ex-wife stopped at the door with Lily in her wheelchair and turned to look at me. She said, "I'm going to teach her that you chose to let this happen." I didn't respond. I did not trust my voice in that moment, and I did not want the woman in the corner to write down whatever came out of my mouth. That was the last time I saw my daughter for 6 years. I tried everything legal. I filed motions for increased visitation. My attorney filed complaints about the relocation. Twice we got as far as a court date, and twice the judge declined to modify the custody arrangement, citing Lily's stable environment and the quality of her care. I sent birthday cards. I sent Christmas cards. I sent letters with photos. My attorney sent formal correspondence, requesting acknowledgement that communications were being received. We received nothing back. After the third year, my attorney told me gently that I was spending money I did not have on a fight the courts had already decided. He was not wrong. I had drained the retirement account I had spent 20 years building. I was 60 years old, living in a rented apartment in a city I had moved to for work, and I had a daughter somewhere in another state whom I was not allowed to see. I kept her AAC device manual on my nightstand. I do not know why. I suppose because it was something that still connected me to the person she had been and the person I hoped she still was. Then, in the second week of March, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer. I was in the middle of making dinner, and I had developed a habit over the years of ignoring unknown numbers because they were so often people calling to tell me something was wrong. But something made me pick up. Maybe instinct. Maybe just timing. There was no voice on the line. There was a sound, a series of tones, digital and rhythmic, and under them a faint background hum that I recognized before I consciously understood why. It was the ambient sound of a hospital corridor. Fluorescent lights, distant intercom, the particular acoustic quality of linoleum floors. Then the tones resolved into something I knew. They were the confirmation tones from an AAC device. The sound it makes when a user selects a symbol. I had heard that sound thousands of times. I had heard it over breakfast and in the car and in waiting rooms and in moments of frustration and in moments of pure joy. I knew that sound the way I knew my own heartbeat. Someone was sending me a message. I sat down on my kitchen floor without deciding to. I listened. The tones came in sequences, and I counted them, and I tried to reconstruct in my head what symbols would produce those sounds in that order. I could not make full sense of it in real time. It was coming too fast, and I was shaking too badly. But I recorded it. I pressed record on my phone's voice memo app before the message was half over, and I got most of it. When it ended, the line went dead. I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time. Then I got up, went to my laptop, and opened the AAC device software I had kept installed there for 6 years. I had updated it every time the company released a new version because I did not know what else to do with the feeling that I needed to stay ready. It took me 4 hours to reconstruct the full message. I had to cross-reference the tonal sequences against the device's audio feedback library, which I had memorized not intentionally, but through sheer repetition of use. When I finally had it mapped out in front of me, I sat very still for a long time. The message read, "Daddy, I love you. Bad things are happening here. The man who lives here hurts Grandma and takes money, and I saw him put papers in the fire." And Grandma cried. Grandma told me, "Do not tell Mommy. Grandma is scared. Please help." I pretend I don't know. I pretend it's school. I have been saving this to say to you, I love you. My daughter was 11 years old. She had found a way to contact me. She had built this message in secret, symbol by symbol, and she had waited until she had access to a phone, and she had called me. I called my attorney the next morning. He told me that what I had was potentially significant, but that I needed the message verified independently before any court would look at it. He said I needed someone with expert credentials in AAC systems to authenticate the communication as genuine, to confirm that the tonal sequences I had recorded actually corresponded to the symbols I had transcribed, and to assess whether the language and structure were consistent with a child of Lily's age and communication profile. I knew someone. I had met her years ago at an assistive technology conference I attended when Lily was first learning her device. She was a professor of speech-language pathology at a university in Ohio, one of the leading researchers in the country on AAC communication development in children with motor disabilities. I had her email somewhere. It took me an hour to find it. I sent her the audio recording and my transcription and a 3-paragraph explanation of who I was and what I believed I was hearing. I did not sleep that night. She responded the next morning. She asked if she could call me. She called me within the hour. Her voice was careful and measured in the way that people's voices get when they are trying not to show how alarmed they are. She said she had listened to the recording twice. She said the tonal sequences were consistent with AAC device output, specifically with the model and software version I had described, which she recognized. She said the message structure, the symbol combinations, the grammar, the way concepts were connected was consistent with a highly proficient AAC user who had been working with the device for several years and had developed advanced expressive language skills. Then she paused. She said, "There are some elements of this message that are outside what I would expect from a child of this age and communication background without significant exposure to adult concepts. The phrase structure around the financial and legal content, the papers, the fire, the fear, these are not symbols that appear in standard pediatric AAC vocabulary sets. She would have had to construct these ideas from component parts. That takes a level of cognitive and linguistic sophistication that is, frankly, remarkable. But it also means she understood what she was describing." I said, "What does that mean for what she described?" She said, "It means she meant it. A child doesn't accidentally construct a message like this. Every symbol she selected was chosen deliberately." She told me she wanted to share the recording with a colleague. She named him a senior researcher and licensed clinical psychologist who specialized in child testimony and communication-based evidence. She said she would not share my name or my daughter's name without my permission, only the audio and transcription. I said yes. She called me back that same afternoon. She said her colleague had listened to the recording and reviewed her analysis and wanted to speak with me directly. She said his assessment was that the communication was credible, internally consistent, and raised concerns serious enough that he felt a legal obligation to discuss next steps. He got on the phone. His voice was steady, but I could hear something underneath it, the controlled urgency of a professional who has seen something they cannot unsee. He said, "Mr." and I told him my name. He said he had 30 years of experience evaluating communication-based evidence in child welfare cases. He said what he heard on that recording, and the linguistic analysis his colleague had performed, indicated a child who was under duress, who had been deliberately concealing distress in her daily environment, and who had constructed the message over time, not in one sitting, but in accumulated selections, which explained some of the tonal gaps in the recording. She had built it piece by piece. He said, "She planned this." He said he was going to refer this to the state's Child Protective Services office and that I should do the same. He said the mention of financial documents being destroyed, the papers in the fire, combined with the mention of physical intimidation and a frightened adult in the home, created a pattern that his office took seriously. He said I should also contact my attorney immediately. What happened over the next 3 months I can only describe from the outside, because most of it was not visible to me. Investigators moved quietly. I was told not to contact my ex-wife or anyone in that household. My attorney filed an emergency motion for a welfare check and submitted the authenticated AAC recording and both expert analyses to the family court. The family court judge, a different one than before, ordered an immediate evaluation. What investigators found was this. My ex-wife had been in a relationship with a man for 4 years. He had moved into her mother's house 18 months after they relocated. He had a history, documented in another state, of financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. Over the course of his time in that household, he had taken control of my mother-in-law's finances, her retirement accounts, her home equity. There was evidence he had destroyed documents. There was evidence of coercive control. My ex-wife, by the time investigators arrived, was not the villain in this chapter of the story. She was also a victim, though one who had made decisions I could not entirely forgive. My mother-in-law was in a bad way. She was frightened and depleted, and she confirmed, when she was interviewed separately, that she had told Lily not to say anything because she was afraid of what would happen if she did. She had not fully understood, she said, that Lily had another way to tell someone. Lily was placed in temporary foster care during the investigation. My emergency motion for custody was granted within 2 weeks. The court appointed a guardian ad litem to represent Lily's interests, and she advocated clearly for placement with me. I drove 16 hours to bring my daughter home. She was 11 years old and sitting in a waiting room with her AAC device in her lap when I walked through the door. She looked up. She did not look the way I remembered. She was older, taller, had her mother's eyes, and something in her jaw that was entirely her own. She watched me cross the room toward her. I crouched down in front of her wheelchair so we were at the same height. She tapped the screen 4 times. I had to ask her, my voice breaking, "What does that mean?" She showed me the screen. She had added a new symbol. She had programmed it herself. It was a custom symbol she had created. The picture was something between a handshake and a hug, rough in the way that hand-drawn images are rough when a child makes them. Underneath it, she had typed a label herself, "Found you." I pressed my forehead against her forehead, the way I used to when she was small, and I did not try to hold back what was happening to my face. The guardian ad litem was in the room. A social worker was in the room. I did not care. I tapped her hand 3 times. She tapped back 3 times. There are things I could not have prepared for. The practicalities of rebuilding, finding a home with accessible features, reestablishing her therapy and education services, navigating the medical history I had been shut out of for 6 years, the way she flinched sometimes at loud male voices, which took months to understand and months more to address, the way she would occasionally grab my arm in grocery stores, not out of fear but out of something that might have been reassurance checking that I was still there. The first night she was home, I made her the meal she had tapped out on her device on the drive from the airport, chicken with butter noodles, which apparently had been her favorite for years and which I had not known. We sat at the kitchen table together. She ate slowly and watched me across the table with an expression I could not fully read. She tapped the screen. The device said, "Do you still know my words?" I said yes. I said I had kept the software updated every year. I said I had kept her manual on my nightstand for 6 years. She looked at me for a moment. Then she tapped out something longer, something that took a while to compose. And when she turned the device toward me, it said, "I kept practicing so I would have enough words when I found you. I learned the hard ones on purpose. I watched the closed caption interpreter on television and taught myself new symbols. I wanted to be able to tell you everything. She has been home for 8 months now. She is in a school she loves, with a support team that treats her device as the voice it is. She has a speech therapist who told me in our first meeting that Lily's AAC proficiency is, and I am quoting, among the most advanced she has encountered in a pediatric patient. I thanked her and did not mention that I had suspected as much since my daughter was 5. My ex-wife is not in prison. She cooperated with the investigation, and the charges against the man in that house do not directly involve her. She has contacted me twice through her attorney, and both times I have let my attorney handle the response. There is a version of the future where Lily has some form of relationship with her mother, and I hold that door open for Lily's sake, not mine. What that looks like is not my decision. It is hers, and when she is ready to make it, she will have enough words. What I want to say to anyone watching this, and I say this as a man who is 63 years old and has made enough mistakes in his life to know what they cost, is that the tools we give our children are not just tools. The time we spend learning their language, sitting with them in the hard, slow work of communication, building vocabulary they might not use for years, that is not wasted time. That is infrastructure. It is the thing they will use to find you when they have no other way. My daughter spent 6 years in a house where something was wrong, and she spent those same 6 years making sure she had enough words to describe it when the moment came. She kept her vocabulary. She built new symbols. She stored the message piece by piece over months, maybe longer, waiting. She was 11 years old and she planned a rescue. I was the one who got rescued. If you are a parent who has been cut off from a child fight, file the motions. Send the cards even when they are returned. Keep the number updated so that if she ever calls from a stranger's phone, you answer. My daughter was silent for 6 years and she was never once not trying to reach me. She told me that herself. She tapped it out one evening when we were watching television, unprompted, like it was something she had been meaning to say. I was always trying to get back to you. I just needed the right day. I still have the voice memo on my phone. The one with the tonal sequences. I have listened to it probably 100 times by now. You can hear in the background noise of that hospital corridor, the sound of a world that had no idea what was about to happen, the fluorescent hum, the distant intercom, the ordinary sounds of a day that was about to become extraordinary. And underneath all of it, my daughter's voice, not her voice, but her voice, tapping out the most important thing she had ever said, one symbol at a time. Daddy, I love you. She told me once, not long after she came home, that she had been scared I would not know how to listen anymore. That 6 years was a long time and maybe I had forgotten. I told her I had never stopped. She looked at me the way she does sometimes, that long, measuring look that her teachers told me means she is deciding whether something is worth saying. Then she tapped 3 symbols. The device said, "Good? Me either."